Television. Nothing brings us together more than the small screen in the corner of the living room. It's entertained us, made us smarter, and, to my mind, brought us some of the most potent music of our times. It's given us a lifetime of golden tunes and has touched more of us, and arguably more profoundly, than the greatest pop classics. TV composers are unsung heroes, and this series is my celebration of them and the shared musical history they've left us. The music that became the real soundtrack to our lives.
I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing with me. Perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a coat and give what the world wants today is the real thing.
That, in the early 1970s, was one of the best-known pieces of music on television. Not just here in Britain, but on screens all around the world. To a certain generation, it immediately conjures up memories of the cool, collective, young appeal of a certain fizzy drink, or at least the appeal to us to buy one. To another generation, this will conjure up memories of a much more domestic kind.
Do the shaking back and put the freshness back. When your carpet smells fresh, your room does too.
These tunes became part of a musical memory box for millions of people, without us even realising it. They didn't particularly have to be melodic tunes. What piece of British classic TV is conjured up by 4 chords?
On your last trip, did you discover what the Earth people eat?
Or mash, get smashed.
Or even just 4 notes. Every one of them an unmistakable part of TV history. And so, in this second episode, I'm going to look not at the music in the programmes, but the music that surrounds them. This is the story of television's hidden persuaders. The music that charted Britain's journey from flat-cap domesticity to the age of cocktail prosperity. From the advertising jingles and idents that have branded our television landscape, to the incidental music, beds and stings that make us sit up and pay attention, I'll explore the sounds that once filled dead time on TV.
Didn't really sound like anything else, certainly didn't sound like pop music.
That branded modern TV news.
It's quite an epic track in quite a short amount of time.
And encouraged us all to spend, spend, spend.
Cha-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching.
And I'll be commissioning a top agency to create a musical identity for a brand with which I am all too familiar.
The vision and sound are on. The station goes on the air.
The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953 saw a huge boom in the take-up of television in this country. In just 3 years, TV licenses soared from 400,000 in 1950 to over 1 million. Though to most households, televisions were still prohibitively expensive, the royal pageant cemented the BBC's role as the heart of the nation.
And now here is the Queen.
And even while it had the monopoly on TV broadcasting, the BBC had the foresight to realise the power of music in creating identity. Long before cameras were turning, its radio service had already adopted a folk music ident that sealed the BBC brand as a global power. Lillibullero, a tune synonymous with England's glorious revolution of 1688 and quintessentially an early national anthem. This was the first piece of music the BBC chose to send out its identity right across the world.
You're tuned to the General Overseas Service of the BBC. This is the British Broadcasting Corporation.
Adopted by the World Service and usually preceded by the stentorian words, "This is London," it has served as the longest-lasting musical shorthand for the values of British public service broadcasting. As TV rapidly became the nation's most valued source of information and entertainment, and the BBC its sole provider, the corporation bigwigs, already established in the W1 postcode of London, were working on using music and graphics to build its TV brand.
Okay guys, I don't know how to say this, but this is not just another brand refresh. This is the British Broadcasting, company.
I'm in favour of the experiment.
The aspirational post-war spirit of the nation was exemplified by the Festival of Britain, which had introduced a country still recovering from years of wartime shortages and austerity to a bright new future of modernist architecture and design. And this was the image the BBC wanted to push. To this end, they commissioned the man behind the festival's logo, forward-thinking graphic designer Abram Games, to come up with Britain's first TV brand. And though he didn't even own a television himself, he created something iconic that electrified the small screen. Games constructed this futuristic model out of piano wire, brass and strobing lights. The intersecting eyes scan the globe, representing the global reach of the BBC. Lightning pulses inwards from the wings, representing electrical forces and the broad creative possibilities of television. This was the BBC proclaiming itself the new window on the world. To begin with, it was hardly an all-round success. One journalist really went for it. Menace, darkness, Germans, torture, aerial bombs and fascist flashes. But when paired with music written by harpist Sidonie Goossens, it takes on an entirely seductive quality all of its own. These soothing chords were the sound of a post-war, comforting, nostalgic Britain, and a forward-looking broadcaster whose values could be projected to millions with just a short mini-symphony of a few notes. This was just the start of TV realising the essential importance of music, not as a theme tune or score, but as something that had its own unique place, the nation's most trusted companion. Even if, in the 1950s, television was still a brand new medium and only broadcast for a few hours each day.
It's always exciting to be at the beginning of anything new.
Perhaps you'd like to come and have a look round with me. This is the camera through which you see me making all my announcements. And there's the microphone which picks up my voice.
Most programmes were shot live in a studio on big, bulky Emitron cameras that cost £10,000 each, a huge sum for the time. As the BBC could only afford 4 of them, these cameras had to be moved, reset, rearranged and adjusted between programmes. To ensure audiences weren't subjected to blank, silent screens, they were instead treated to interludes. Comfortingly sedate short films made simply to fill time, accompanied by quintessentially English divertimenti, with swooshing harps and cascading violins that recalled the pastoral warmth of Vaughan Williams. Top of the interlude charts was The Potter's Wheel, featuring the hands of craftsman Georges Aubertin as he started, but never actually finished, throwing a pot. Talk about keeping viewers on the edge of their seats. Its soundtrack, a lilting waltz entitled The Young Ballerina, was commissioned from film composer Charles Williams, who later wrote the stunning theme to Billy Wilder's The Apartment. But this seemingly throwaway melody came to be better known by the general public than any of his fabulous movie music. Yet perhaps even more fondly remembered today, by viewers of a certain age, was another screen filler, the test card, a practical tool for the TV industry that was never even meant to be watched.
The most frequently used test signal is the familiar test card picture, and different areas of this picture are used to test for different system defects.
Its oral wallpaper became a household staple for young and old alike. It gave off a reassuring vibe for its audience. The programmes will be back soon, keep watching, but meanwhile, have a cup of tea and relax with this gentle soundtrack.
When I was very young, the girl on the test card was incredibly potent, though I was never allowed to stay up that late. You know, occasionally, if I woke up, you know, I'd be listening to the music.
Strange instrumental music, which didn't really sound like anything else, certainly didn't sound like pop music, have this kind of otherworldly quality to them because they weren't really made to be sat down and listened to at home.
Founder member of 60s influenced band St Etienne, Bob Stanley has loved test card music since childhood, and it continues to influence his work today.
I used to record the test card, have like C60s full of this stuff, and have to invent names for the songs. But I mean, sometimes you did just get a pure tone for like 10 minutes, which is quite avant-garde, really. My gran used to have the test card on while she was doing the housework. Telly beyond the corner, and it was just pretty easy listening music, I suppose, for her. So she kind of been on her own. I mean, I think, you know, if you didn't want to listen to Jimmy Young on Radio 2 or whatever, then you might just put the test card on, and there'd be like 3 or 4 hours of instrumental music.
In its heyday, some 40 or 50 years ago, recording test card music was a TV composer's passport to musical freedom. They created a distinctive sound with high production values and a unique sophistication. Decades later, test card tunes have become a potent musical memory for a whole new generation.
It exists in a parallel universe because you never heard anyone talk about it or never turned up on Top of the Pops.
And though it was purely functional, what we'd now perhaps call Muzak, today this somewhat eccentric lounge music has developed a cult following. Bob Stanley even plays it in his DJ club nights.
The musicians were really good on those records, and the playing is incredible, they're very tight.
Never sold commercially, test card music should have faded into the ether, but today it's had a resurgence, thanks to interest from an unlikely quarter. Who'd have predicted that an accidental byproduct from the dawn of British TV would cross the Atlantic to soundtrack modern urban America?
Samples is the real key thing. Hip-hop uses lots of samples. I think initially a lot of hip-hop samples were breaks, they were looking for breaks, but I think it's become, you know, as hip-hop's evolved, they're looking for slightly more abstract things, just anything that would sound good in a loop.
Yeah, you're waking up, cold in my eyes, 2 Phillies ready, rolled on the dresser. My chick hating, I won't stress her. Probably get her mad and pay attention much lesser. Hit the closet up, brush my teeth and get fresher.
Brian Bennett, who was the drummer in The Shadows, who wrote Test Card Music, has had his stuff sampled by Kanye West.
Marvels and frights and strange delights, attributes, properties, disciplines, and
it's weird because there's this whole new lease of life for this music, and it's probably making a lot more money now than it did at the time.
Ruler standing still, sweating through the shade.
Commercial television is here.
In 1954, a government bill, the Television Act, changed the way the gaps between television programmes could be filled, allowing commercials to be shown on British television for the first time. But the Act's passing was not without controversy. Both Parliament and the press hotly debated whether adverts would have a detrimental effect on British culture. For where the BBC was seen as an arbiter of moral values, ITV's raison d'etre would be to make money, and critics feared it would turn Britons into crazed consumers.
If television is financed by advertising, even people with good taste will get their taste depreciated.
Scaremongers painted a sinister vision of Britain becoming just like the US, with whole swathes of airtime filled with adverts, drenched with tunes written for the sole purpose of making the masses spend money. Ever so vulgar.
Want to take a little walk with me?
After all, those dastardly Yanks had interrupted the Queen's coronation with an advert featuring a chimpanzee.
Commercial television is here.
Regardless, in 1955, ITV, or Independent Television, was launched. And the fear that post-war Britain, snuggled in the test card music era, was to be rudely awakened by brash American commercialisation wasn't altogether unfounded.
You were looking a bit cagey when you came in there then, weren't you?
Yes. There was a definite perceived difference, which I think still remains, actually. BBC is good and proper and will educate you, and ITV is a bit naughty. It's a bit rude. There was a bit too much music, everybody was a bit too American, and there were adverts.
The first ad broadcast on British television was for Gibbs SR toothpaste. Now, to modernise, it will look pretty laughable, but bear in mind, advertising was absolutely in its infancy. And have a listen to what the music's doing. This pastoral, gentle mood is playing totally against the experimental stop-motion visuals.
It's tingling fresh. It's fresh as ice. It's Gibbs SR toothpaste. The tingling fresh toothpaste that does your gums good, too.
Ballroom dancing champions Alf Davis and Julie Reeby say Coca-Cola puts you at your spot.
Early advertising was finding its way, but if you listen to the music,
Refreshingly different.
that's the key to understanding the dawn of commercial TV.
Go, snap when you break it, crunch when you bite it.
This crunchy ad of 1959 still had one foot in Variety, which was the main form of entertainment programme on British TV at the time. The close harmony singing makes it comfortingly middle of the road. These early ads are keen to reassure their audience they're not out to rock the boat, just sell them a bit more chocolate. But across the pond, things were a bit different. For the music in their commercials, they actually invented a whole new musical genre. An earworm that would hypnotise a new mass television audience. The jingle. In 1950, only 9% of US households owned a TV set. Within 2 years, that figure had risen to 72%. The music that people heard between the programmes was fast becoming more ingrained in the public consciousness than the music in the programmes themselves. After all, as David Ogilvy, the father of modern advertising, said, if you don't have anything to say, sing it. The story of the jingle fascinates me. It's music not for music's sake, but music designed specifically to influence behaviour.
I'm Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say bananas have to ripen.
Initially, jingles were more informative than persuasive, using the instantly catchy language of pop music to grab your attention and sell the advertiser's message.
Put them in a salad. Grief? No, not yet, my dear.
The Chiquita Banana song hit the airwaves in 1944 and aimed to teach consumers how to eat and store bananas, which hadn't been imported to America during the war.
But bananas like the climate of the very, very tropical equator. So you should never put bananas in the refrigerator.
The lyrics didn't necessarily rhyme, but the calypso rhythm and the sexy animated fruit seemed to make the information stick. You really never should put bananas in the refrigerator.
This is FCC.
By the 1960s, ad agencies were hungry to capture a younger, hipper audience. But US TV, sitcoms like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, still felt for the most part like they had one foot in a sort of Doris Day-style America. So it was the commercials and their use of hipper music, not the stuck-in-the-50s programs, that introduced the sound of youth culture to a mass audience. Pepsi's 1969 ad with the strapline, "You've got a lot to live and Pepsi's got a lot to give," channeled the spirit of the hippie era, reflecting modern multicultural society, with a song that could have been straight out of the musical Hair.
Coming at you, going strong. Put yourself
Pepsi wanting to ride the wave of the youth culture zeitgeist, even though the marketing brief sounded like it had been written by an aging executive who just discovered tie-dye T-shirts. This is youth's bag, and Pepsi-Cola's in it, with a song written for the now sound. It obliterates the generation gap and communicates like a guru. But arch-rival Coca-Cola was not to be outdone, drafting in top songwriting talent in the form of Roger Cook and Roger Greenaway, the British duo behind some of the biggest hits of the day. Their song would transform the brand.
I'd like to buy the world a home, furnish it with love. Oh, I put trees and honeybees and the snow white turtle dove.
So the main account exec for Coca-Cola said, I love the melody, but that lyric will never work for Coke. So it was rewritten as I'd like to teach the world to sing. It's on air as a radio jingle for about a month, 2 months at most, and didn't have any great reaction to it whatsoever.
Somehow the song alone didn't connect.
A load of young men and women up on a hill, each holding a Coke bottle, singing something anthemic.
Now, this idea may have had a simple elegance, but actually getting it in the can was no mean feat.
Day of filming, he's got 3 cameras and a helicopter flying around to get the area shots. He was in contact with the helicopter, but he had to use hand signals for the kids on the hill. Kids thought it was a signal to come down and have refreshment. So they start charging down the hill. One of the kids brushes past and smashes one of the cameras. And the helicopter pilot wonders what the hell's going on, starts coming around to land and lands very badly. Anyway, finally, he finishes the commercial. He's called into the financial controller's office, who says, "Harvey, do you realize how much money you've spent on this commercial?" And Harvey said, "Well, I'm sure I've gone over budget." And he said, "Harvey, you spent in excess of $250,000. And Harvey was sacked.
I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. I'd like to build the world a home.
The New Seekers were swiftly drafted in to record it as a single, and clearly helped by all the airplay it was getting as a commercial, it went straight to #1, not only in America, but around the world. This dramatic epiphany was no exaggeration. In the boom of America's land of plenty, the riches from TV jingles and advertising bankrolled the entire television industry. This was the music that powered the nation and, for TV stations, kept the money rolling in. And what money! No one better demonstrates this than Queen of the Jingle, Linda November, whose dulcet tones have advertised everything from Double Mint gum to Diet Coke. She's been the voice of so many products that those jingles are a highlight of her regular Las Vegas cabaret act.
Put on the headset, here we go. It's a tab, it's a Sprite, Pepsi free, Coke is it. No matter which way you sing it, it's the same old you know.
I sang 22,000 jingles in my career. And at one time, it was the Oscars. I just came home and I lay down on the couch and I put on the Oscars. I did every single commercial that was on. It was me. And I'm going ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. I was a soprano who swung. That's what they all said. You name the artist, Perry Como, Sinatra, Burt Bacharach, Humperdinck. And then I worked with Streisand. I sang the whoa-whoas on San Jose. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And I must tell you, with all humility, I was the greatest group singer ever. Then I did my first jingle. And it was, oh, Fab, they put real borax in you. 2 weeks later, I get the check in the mail. And I open it up, and I think it says $180. My mother said, let me see that. It was $18,000. And my mother said, darling, find out how we do more of these. Okay?
Love the we.
We.
What would a week be like for you in terms of work and in terms of the money you were earning?
Oh, God. I go from one to the other to the other. 30 sessions a week. A Monday would be $70,000, $80,000. A bad week would be like 40 or 50. I'd be depressed.
Were you aware of how important the jingle was as part of
Absolutely.
TV culture?
They were the greatest. They were the greatest writers. They were wonderful songs. They told a story.
Figurines do a lady proud.
They're the diet lunch that you can crunch out loud.
Crunch, 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 crunch. They're the most unquiet kind of diet lunch.
What was the status of a jingle singer within the advertising industry? How much were you valued?
Ah! Number one, the real jingle singers, they were master musicians. We all were.
In 1974, Linda was brought into the studio to record the now classic Meow Mix jingle, giving voice to some rather demanding felines.
We need this cat to sound high and wispy and airy. So I had to watch the cat. I had to watch her. And she went. So finally it was meow, meow. Perfect. 4 takes. We had it perfect. And in those days, they tested it and say, tell us what you think of this. It scored almost an 88. Oh my God, it's great. So they put it on. I exclusively did it for 17 years.
Linda's fur-lined earworm clawed its way into the hearts and minds of the American public, never growing old, staying fresh for decades. As iconic as any theme tune, it's been parodied by everyone from The Simpsons to Saturday Night Live. Even Dr. Evil's got in on the act.
I want chicken, I want liver, meow mix, please deliver.
The power of the TV jingle in a nutshell. Written to sell truckloads of cat food, parodied in a Hollywood hit movie.
Honey.
British TV's hidden persuaders recognised the power of this secret weapon and ran with it, albeit with a distinctly knowing, humorous sensibility. British jingles, such as the memorable Club Biscuit campaign, channelled a very homely pub sing-along feel. And as something that could be a well-paid career option, writing jingles attracted some top-notch musicians. Our White's hugely successful Secret Lemonade Drinker jingle was written by a certain Ross McManus, with his teenage son Declan on backing vocals, better known as Elvis Costello. That's him, there on the right.
Stale smells up here often come from down there. And
But for me, this unshakable hook was the pinnacle of catchy jingles.
It's all you have to do. Do the shake and back and put the freshness back. Do the shake and back and put the freshness back.
The Shake and Vac ad featured one of the most effective jingles of all time. It was so popular with the audience that it was revived, complete with the original dancing housewife, Jenny Logan, for its 30-year anniversary.
It's all you have to do. Do the shake and back and put the freshness back.
But it wasn't just cheery sing-alongs that caught the ear of the great British public. During the ad breaks, you got some surprisingly stately fare as well. The Hamlet advert is self-effacing British humour at its best. Jacques Lucier's jazz rendition of Bach's Air on the G-string, building tension. And contrasting with the punchline of the commercial. While 70s Britain rang out to the sound of glam rock, classical music became a staple of the British ad break.
Everyone's a fruit and a nutcase. It keeps you going when you...
Cadbury's brilliant Fruit and Nut campaign used Tchaikovsky to devilish effect.
I remember playing the Nutcracker in England years ago and seeing some people behind the audience looking at each other going, I'm a Cadbury's Fruit and Nutcase.
Everyone's a fruit.
Some felt the juxtaposition of Tchaikovsky with a chocolate bar was sacrilege, but to my mind, bringing in the greats to something as throwaway as confectionery was very smart. The gravitas of the tune probably made you feel better about putting on the calories. In 2019, the 1973 Hovis ad, directed by Ridley Scott, who'd go on to be a blockbuster director, was voted Britain's most heartwarming and iconic advert of all time.
'Twas like taking bread to the top of the world. 'Twas a grand ride back, though. I knew Baker would have kettle on, and doorsteps of hot always ready. There's wheat germ in that loaf, he'd say. Get it inside you, boy, and you'll be going up that hill as fast as you come down.
That's an extraordinary musical mashup, if you think about it. Dvorak's New World Symphony, a Czech composer writing about America, arranged for brass band, which we automatically think of in this country as Northern, shot in Shaftesbury, and with a voiceover from the West Country. Now, how does all that add up to the magic we've finally got? Well, it's very simple. It plays into something we all feel, which is nostalgia, and nostalgia for childhood, going back to a simpler time. And somehow that music feels like what it felt like to be a happy child. Perhaps the finest example of the merging of the worlds of classical music and commerce for the TV masses was Fiat's 1979 visual and oral feast, hand-built by robots. Clocking in at a hefty 2 minutes, its premiere filled an entire News at 10 ad break. And for an audience obsessed with the newly released Star Wars, this was as close to sci-fi as you were going to get. The ad managed to convert social anxieties about futuristic technologies taking all our jobs away into a fun, productive and high-energy celebration of technological advances, all through the music. The accompanying aria, taken from Rossini's comic opera The Barber of Seville, gives the robots a sense of personality, making them seem less threatening. And the libretto couldn't be more perfect, asking us to make way for the city's servant, who's ready to do anything, night and day. The charm, flair and humour of Rossini's music matched the creative, fun, quintessentially Italian sense of style the brand was trying to promote. But in the real Italy, things were very different. When the crew went to the Fiat factory in Turin to shoot the ad, they had to get past furious pickets, workers protesting at job losses that had been caused by the very robots featured in the ad. And in Britain, where society's mood music was similarly fractious,
we're virtually out of business while the power's off.
If you did have a job and some money to spend, the madmen of advertising were out to distract you with aspirational adverts and aspirational music.
Like, think about Esso, do you remember? And it had Tiger and it had a Jeff Wayne score. I mean, a Jeff Wayne score.
Prog rock supremo Jeff Wayne is the man behind epic 70s concept album The War of the Worlds, which stayed in the charts for over 5 years. But he's also written scores of television theme tunes and jingles for more than 3,000 adverts, not least that famous Esso commercial. What would have been your brief for the Esso ad? Were you given visuals to work to, or were you working entirely out of your own head to begin with?
There was a brief, and there were visuals sent to me. It was like, instead of a Formula One car revving up just before the race started, this was like a tiger that was on a beach, and with its claws, it was getting ready to get going, and suddenly takes off. The tiger kept building in his power, and the muscles, the whole visual part of it. And then at the very end, he sort of pauses and rises up, and it turns into an SO sign. And my music followed his movements. The rise of the melody does just that, just as the tiger roams.
Though Esso was simply selling petrol, the music was advertising a sense of freedom. Similarly, Jeff's score left viewers feeling that Gordon's gin, a brand that's been around since the 18th century, was cool, sophisticated, and modern.
The visuals were for its day, very exciting. There's close-up shots on ice cubes and the feeling of cold and all that. I had my Moog 3C, and I recorded the entire thing other than the band and the string quartet. I was working with two particular engineers, and they thought I was a bit kooky with what I was trying to do. But once the real instruments went into the electronic part, it just blended and became its own thing.
It's incredibly immersive. You got the music to sound like it was being made by the visuals we were watching.
I still reckon it's one of the very best fresh compositions I've ever done.
This was the heyday of British TV advertising. Big budget with cinematic ambition and scores that sounded as grand as any movie soundtrack. Meanwhile, TV itself was mushrooming. The days of domination by one or two channels was over. But the ways in which the channels branded themselves were beginning to look distinctly old-fashioned. The arrival of a new kid on the block was going to shake things up.
Channel 4 was really exciting. I mean, it's hard to explain how exciting it was, but it arrived and there was a sense that it was modern and a bit punk.
Channel 4 wanted to shake up the look and the sound of the classic TV ident.
Spread the word.
Enter branding supremo Martin Lambie-Nairn and jingle writer turned pop star David Dundas.
Jeans on. I pull my old blue jeans on. I pull my blue jeans on. I pull my old blue jeans on.
David said, I've got an idea. Will you come over? I need a wonderful house with a beautiful room with a great grand piano. And I sat down beside him, expecting to hear or something. And he went, boom, 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 and looked at me. He said, well, yeah, it's the idea. Oh. So I said, well, could we have one note shorter than the other, perhaps? Something like boom, 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 boom. And that was my input to the music. That was it.
Yes, the four notes, the power of four notes. And those little motifs, or not motifs, but those themes, we don't have them anymore. But they were so powerful in terms of their branding.
The other established channels were so jealous they could barely speak.
The Channel 4 ident, with its memorable four-note tune, so established the brand that the BBC felt it had to up its game.
To pay £35, £34 for a channel I don't look at is quite expensive.
Auntie was seen as rather staid and traditional, but Director General John Burt was determined to go head-to-head with Channel 4. The ident wars were on. The Great British Sting-Off.
He said, we need to reposition the BBC as a global creative powerhouse. The ITV people thought it was the best bit of comedy that had come out of the BBC for years. I remember being briefed by the BBC that the whole thing needed to be very energetic and loud and all that kind of thing. And I said, why? For instance, just sat in silence. And I said, I've got your attention now, haven't I? character of the BBC is not brassy, loud. We're calm and confident, and actually we're producing quality stuff. We don't do loud and banging about.
Composer Phil Sawyer gave the stunning visual a rippling, soaring piano score that gives wings to the idea that this channel is the entire world. The BBC is coming to every gorgeous corner of the country, rhythmically and harmonically uplifting and unifying.
But BBC Two had to be branded separately, in effect.
Oh, yes. You see, BBC Two had been taken over by Alan Yentob, and he had invested a lot of money in lots of comedy and drama. And it was very popular stuff. But the research was telling them that they were seen as stuffy and dull and snooker. So we had to kind of go, bang. I wanted to move it on and actually do some risky stuff.
Composers Tony and Gaynor Sadler were given the daunting task of coming up with the melody.
The music was very interesting, because you can't even say it's the music, you say the sound.
The sound for the Falling To had a kind of metallic sound in it.
Yes, very metallic. And it was the sort of thing you'd actually put up against a tough drama or something like that. And suddenly we're in slightly surreal, verging on Dada. And then they went on to do a kind of form of sound, which you knew full well as soon as you heard it, it was BBC Two, and hooray, I'd arrived at last at a non-jingle television brand identity. Nowhere in the world had anything like this.
The striking sound design gives the BBC Two ident a distinct sense of character, the sophisticated tone and instrumentation signalling that what's coming next is original and high quality. The next problem for the BBC was the news. They wanted to make sure everyone all over the world recognised it was BBC News, but it wasn't going to be an easy task. The music shouldn't be either too upbeat or downbeat. It should sound authoritative without being too scary, and be able to introduce reports that could vary wildly in tone.
Good afternoon. The Queen has opened the new session of Parliament with the traditional ceremony at Westminster.
BBC News had, over the years, gone from sounding like this, to this, to this. But its new incarnation revolutionised how a news theme should sound.
It's the BBC News theme. Almost everyone will recognise it, and I think that these things do become a part of national identity.
I'd long thought that the best ident for anything on radio and television had been the Pips. We'd grown up with it right from the war, so I thought, we're going to have that.
David Lowe was one of several composers who'd been asked to respond to Martin's brief.
David was last in, and we were kind of like suicidal. Sits down, bang, hits the tape. And we went, oh my goodness, he's got it.
But he absolutely used the Pips.
Well, he would have had his legs broken if he didn't.
BBC News 24, that was the first time I'd had the sense that the music suggested something had been happening beforehand, and then it was going to go on happening afterwards, so it wasn't just about the moment of the branding of the programme.
It acts as a musical glue, terribly important. This glue for the whole show.
David Lowe's theme has been so successful that it's still being used over 20 years after its debut in 1999. And it's even inspired an abundance of viral tributes.
It's got the underlying beat, which makes it 120 BPM, so it's like, it is quite like a rave tune. And What it does is that classic thing of going into a minor chord and then resolving with a major. Don't worry about it, everything will be okay, the BBC News is here. But it's quite an epic track in quite a short amount of time.
This is the BBC!
The power of short pieces of music,
Do not listen to the others!
many of them ones we scarcely clocked, has, as we've seen, played a critical role in the way the medium has grown and got its funding through licence fee or advertising. But the oh-so-clever tricks learnt in the bits between the programmes have crept into one type of show in particular. Quiz shows brought parlour games to prime time.
Who can spell pseudonym? Terence? P-S-E-U.
But making you care about someone else playing a game required an extra ingredient. Catchy, short clips of music, a bit like idents, known in the trade as stings.
Rill.
285.
2 away, James.
Imagine that with the sound turned down.
28.
Possibly a little underwhelming. Countdown is now a classic with more than 10,000 episodes. But would it have made it to 50 without its pioneering game show music?
So, like, you know, if you're thinking of something and I'm like, you're taking too long, I just go do-do-do-do-do-do-do, boo, and you have to give me your answer.
The countdown clock is now so deeply implanted in the national consciousness that it's become a musical catchphrase.
It's such a crowded visual landscape, the proliferation of channels everywhere, that the music does have to shout a little bit louder.
Contemporary game shows are totally steeped in music, and it's actually crucial to a programme's success. And composers must come up with a raft of components, including musical beds and stings, which help to provide structure and bring drama to the gameplay.
Everyone making a show is trying to have an identity, trying to be distinctive. People are trying to make their series stand out.
Mark Sylvan may be the modern-day king of game show music, but even he's not immune to moments of creative anxiety.
I do feel terrible dread at the start, because you've got to get by so many ears and get the sign-off. I once had a dream where a flock of ears, just ears flying at me, were coming at me from the horizon like the birds.
Mark has credits ranging from The Masked Singer to £1 Million Drop, but General Knowledge Quiz Pointless presented its own set of specific demands.
When the producer got in touch, the first thing they said is there's a counter effect, which lasts for about 10 seconds, but it's played about 30 times a show. So he said, if you get this wrong, people will want to kill you. So I initially went in with a few little early ideas like this kind of synthetic kind of thing. And the feedback they had was, can you be more organic? And the word organic hits you. And when I hear the word organic, I run away from the keyboard. So I started plucking at a Fender, I think it was, which I thought, that's more organic. It feels like something real made it. Maybe if I speed it up a bit now, it could become a bit more like a counter. So up it went. And at this point, I got the graphics through and I saw what the counter looked like and how it moved down. So suddenly, I sped this up a bit more. If this was in the 70s, you might have got away with that. But they said, could it have more richness to it? So I added a little synth to it, which was... and then combined it with the guitar. And then you have the bottom end, which is the ambient kind of build, which is the thing that gives it the depth. And then combine them all together, and here's the counter. And of course, at the end of it there, that's the pointless answer.
Fantastic.
In fact, sometimes it's best not to believe anything at all. If you want to win big on golden balls.
Now, you use sounds that we wouldn't expect to hear in order to make your music fresh for game shows.
On the show Golden Balls. So I thought, you know what, I'm playing snooker with my pal later. I'll take a mic along and record and then smuggle them into the beds. So hopefully people at home are thinking, oh, balls.
Sharon Paul, I want you to choose either your split or your steel ball now.
If you heard that under a shot of somebody walking through a wood, you just know that person is about to get jumped on. It's what we as an audience all recognise as threat.
Yes, well, I always tend to write the beds at 120 beats per minute, because if ever there's a clock on screen, of course, this cues in perfectly.
10, 9, 8.
And the human heartbeat ought to be around that tempo. Plus, of course, you've got little bits of sprinkly glitter to give a sense that this is light entertainment. It's not, you know, Saw 4 or whatever it is. In fact, that's one of the common comments. Too horror, rein it in. Too terrifying.
Come on,
So you're always trying to get it light but tense, and the music's trying to tell people something beyond things they see.
You chose Miss Piggy.
Yes.
Subconsciously prime people and send them in different directions sometimes.
2, 1. Wrong answer is Miss Piggy.
Oh my God!
Stings, idents, jingles. What have I learned? Well, their apparent simplicity is very deceptive. They're all a highly polished and precise musical art form. So, to round off my exploration of these TV music nuggets, I've come back to New York for an experiment. I want to try and brand the most difficult product I can imagine. Me. And to that end, I'm going to be talking to one of the very top commercial production houses in this town. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Jingle Punks. The jingle.
Dun, dun, dun.
Absolutely.
It's not really a word that we use that often. I think the 50,000-foot view long-term history of the jingle is this early days of advertising, exposition, selling a product. I think we are now on the other side of that, Jingle 2.0, whatever you want to call it. It's a search for authenticity, where it's less about telling you something and more about making you feel something.
An award-winning band of mavericks, Jingle Punks can turn their hand to any brief. From the music for a sports shoe commercial to the branding of TV coverage of sport itself. They've even produced a techno version of the legendary Meow Mix jingle.
Is that a starting point? Is that somewhere we can go from?
And now it's my turn. The brief to sum up the real me, in words and music, and in less than 30 seconds.
So, first things first, how would you normally ask someone what they would like from you?
Normally we try and find the general vibe of either genre or feeling that we're trying to capture, a direction that is you.
My favourite film music has always been film noir. I'd be like a character or a personality, but that doesn't mean that I'd be kind of glamorous in any way. But it would be great if the music was glamorous. It would be great if the branding was glamorous. So something along these lines. So quite kind of smoky and with a bit of a feel of the 40s, maybe.
Can you give me just an ending chord, a sting as we call it in the biz?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just wish you were here always so that I could be like, now play that.
I
know. People tend to knock commercial music, but creating music that is specifically meant to define something or someone, as opposed to the pure expression of pop, jazz, or classical creativity, can be a really subtle and complex task.
I grew up with neo-noir films and like David Lynch and stuff, so immediately I imagine the voice of someone who's, you know, some nondescript narrator person singing on a stage.
Yeah. And the darkness of that is what I think I really like.
For me,
Portishead is a great sort of example of taking that noir vibe but making it into pop music.
You've just summed up what I would love as a branding.
I want like this smoke that you're talking about to like guide us into the space. And then we sit there and we see you, the piano man.
Yeah, I like that one.
Branding with Bren, branding with Bren.
Yeah.
You're just ending it on that.
30 seconds on the nose.
Can we listen back and see what we have?
Follow the smoke, down, down we go. Eyes asking you why, behind the shadow. So tune in and turn on to our piano man, branding with
Jingles and idents, the shortest forms of music I've ever looked at, but they have taught me how, just like a picture, a few notes can tell 1,000 words. Change the way you feel about a product, a TV station, and yes, even myself. Less really is more. Next time, I'll be looking at how music revolutionized the sound of TV documentary.
It is epic. You could be listening to Ben-Hur or something, you know.
Seeing how composers underscore the emotion of real-life storytelling.
It's absolutely crucial to underplay and restrain and hold back on the music.
And I'll explore how the epic scores of the movies influence today's blockbuster TV dramas.